Hey everyone! Welcome to the November video for the Pontiac Creative Arts Center Fiber Arts Club. I'm still Nick. Hi, nice to see you again. And it was really nice to meet those of you that were able to make it to the October meeting. Just a couple things before we get started with the November project. I do want to encourage you, if you haven't got a chance to see the October video yet on YouTube, definitely look for that or contact the center. It is something that you need to access from a video or from an email because it's a private video, but that's got an introduction to me and the club and the first project. I also want to encourage you, please join in on the Zoom chat if you haven't had a chance yet, because it gives us a chance to see what each other is working on outside of that meeting too. It's also a great space to ask questions and just like connect and say hi. So definitely join in on Zoom chat if you haven't had a chance yet. Besides that, I do want to just say that I hope you're doing well, and I'm really excited to show you our next project. Our November project is going to be soft sculpture from found materials. There's two different approaches that I'll talk about in this video, but the idea is that you can utilize old clothing or other found materials in order to make a soft sculpture project. The recommendation is to make dolls, creatures, monsters, very Halloween vibes. I'm here for it. But if you wanted to do something that's more abstract, you're definitely welcome to do that with these sorts of approaches too. So let's talk about materials. Things that you will need that are included in your kit. You're definitely going to need thread. You may want embroidery thread to decorate with later. You will need needles. I would use snips. I'm always using the needle threader. And you do have buttons and safety pins in here that you could be using for decor. Safety pins are great to pin your fabric together, but I am actually going to use straight pins just because I have them in my other sewing kit. Use whatever is available and easy for you. Things that you're going to need that are not in your kit for this week's project are going to be your fabric, and I do encourage you, if you can use old materials, like repurposed materials, do it. I love working with repurposed materials. It's really nice to them to give them new life. You know what I mean? You're also going to want scissors, and you will need something to use for stuffing. Polyfill is great if you have it. If you don't, alternatives, you could use cut up t-shirts, yarn. I happen to have roving that someone gave me. It's kind of expensive for a stuffing option, but if you got it for free, it's not. If you have an old pillow that you need to fix, that you're not going to fix, seal some stuffing out of it. That's great stuffing. You could also use foam or plastic bags, or if you want to go for the second approach that I'm going to talk about, where you start with the form first and work out, foam, carpet padding, styrofoam, stuff like that works really good for that. And anything that you might want to decorate with. For me, I'm mostly going to be doing embroidery, but I happen to also have these spikes that I've had since I was a teenage rebel that I'm going to use for my cube. Also, either a marker or chalk, and if you are doing the first approach where you start with your form first and then stuff it, you're going to need paper to make your pattern. I'm going to talk about this approach first. It works really good for stuffed animals or things that are along those lines, and that's to start with your fabric, make pattern pieces, sew them together, and then stuff and decorate them. For me, basically all I did was I drew out my cactus, dude. I'm not that into cactuses. I'm just like feeling it. It's a vibe lately. I will say I'm feeling a little prickly in the world right now, so that might be why. Maybe this is me. I don't know. But I started by drawing that, and then I drew another line around the outside about 1/2 inch out for my seam allowance, which is very important. Basically what I did next, and I've got a little bit prepped here just to make this video go fast. I had chopped up a t-shirt. I traced it on the front, all the way around the outside of the seam allowance, and then I flipped it to trace what my back piece is going to be. Now, in real life, when it's finished, your front and your back piece will be cut out and they'll be together like this and stuffed. But when you go to make this project, you would cut them out in full, which I have not done here. I've cut them out in part to save a little bit of time. But you would cut them out in full, and then you would take your front piece and your back piece, and instead of putting them so they're on the outside, you would flip them so that they face each other. So front faces the back. After that, I would lay them flat and pin them. You don't have to pin it a whole ton, just enough to kind of keep it together near the edges where you're gonna sew. And then I just used a back stitch, and when I stitch it along where my original drawing is. You can kind of see that little bit of seam allowance that's left over. And identify what edge you're gonna leave open so that you can flip it inside out and stuff it. For me, my bottom edge is my flat edge, so I will sew all the way around except for this bottom edge, at which point in time I'll turn it inside out like a sock. And then I will stuff it, and then I will sew this closed and decorate it. This is a good approach if you want to build your shape first and then stuff it. I'm going to call that the stuffed version. The opposite way to do that would be to make a formed version. The formed version would be where you're starting with something where you build the inside of it first because it's a little bit more structural, and then you add your fabric to the outside of it. I have a not in super great shape example, but just to give you something to look at in this video, I oftentimes kind of combine painting with other extra stuff. So this is what I would call the formed version. And like, for example, these guys right here, these are foam pieces that I cut, and then I draped my fabric over the top of them, and I actually Mod Podged it so that it sort of held its shape, and it's just pinned together on the side because it's hard to sew through Mod Podge. Over here, this sort of area, this is actually just a piece of basket reed that has the fabric pinned around it. There's a little bit of foam down in here, but a lot of this is just fabric that's sort of folded and pinned down or folded and sewed down. I will leave you some better examples of artists that do that as like their main practice in the Google chats, or I'm sorry, the Zoom chat, so you can see what's going on with that. But yeah, I would start with the form, build it up, add your fabric over the top, close it up in whatever way makes sense for your project, and then decorate it. Okay, so those are the steps for the two types of projects that we have. Is pretty open-ended as far as how you get to your finished soft sculpture. And I want to encourage you to just sort of do what is calling to you. I do have a couple tips and tricks if you are new to this type of thing. Let's talk about fabric weight and stuffing. I want you to think about what your finished project is going to be. If it's going to be something that's just going to be decorative and on your shelf, yes, you can absolutely use like a lightweight, stretchy old t-shirt. That's fine. If you're using something that you're planning to, I don't know, give to like a young person in your life as a stuffed animal, or if you're planning to stuff it with something that's not smooth, like I would say polyfill, polylo stuffing, roving, those are smooth. But things like plastic bags or paper are not really smooth. You're going to want a thicker weight fabric, and you may even want to double it up. By having the thicker weight fabric, it's sturdier, it can stand up to being utilitarian and being used. And also it's not going to be as lumpy and bumpy if you use a stuffing that's not super smooth as, say, like a thinner fabric would be. Also consider what you want to do as far as decorating goes up front. Yes, you can absolutely decide later, but for some projects it may make more sense to decorate your materials before you sew them together, especially if you are building like a project where you start with the form and add to the outside. If you have something on the inside that's like foam, it may be hard to decorate afterwards because there's no give behind it for your needle to work through. So just a thing to consider. I also want to share a really great idea that Sharon shared in our group meeting in October. Thanks, Sharon. If you wanted to make a figure that was posable, like I'm kind of thinking now that I might make the arms for this one posable. You could add wire onto the inside as like an armature, if you have it. Basically all that means is that I will take a piece of wire and shape it like my cactus arm, and I'll add it to the inside of it before I close it up, so that it'll have the opportunity to be able to be posed. I may need to do a couple stitches to secure it in place, but again, because mine is mostly decorative and it's not like gonna be used heavily, I may just add the wire in. We'll see. I'm gonna play with it a little bit because this is a new idea for me. But like I said, shout out Sharon, thanks. Great idea. This could be a great way to build out your form a little bit more. I will again leave us some resources in the chat for cool soft sculptures, but the other thing that I want to challenge you to do, if you are a person who does fibers pretty regularly already, if this is feeling like kind of a basic project to you, I want to really challenge you to think beyond the object that you're making. What if instead of just making a stuffed cactus, I was making a stuffed cactus and a stuffed rock friend and then a little fabric desert for them to live in? What if I was taking my stuffed cactus and then taking it out into the world and taking photographs with it in places that make literally no sense? You can take something that seems like it might be a pretty basic form or a pretty basic project and get pretty artistic with it. So I do want to challenge you, if this is something that you can whip out in, 30 minutes, do something extra with it. If you have the desire and you have the time, I would love to see what you come up with. Okay, so I think that's all that I have to go over in this video. Thank you for hanging out, and I can't wait to see what you're making. And as always, please feel free to leave any questions or share what you're working on, or just connect in the Zoom chat. And we'll see you at the November meeting. Okay, thanks. Bye.